In December of 2022, I wrote a piece discussing the frustrating release of WB Montreal's Gotham Knights. In the opening paragraphs I wrote, "Understandably, Gotham Knights has obstacles defying its success from the get-go. It's a title set in the Batman universe that doesn't star Batman, and a game that's been unceremoniously asked to become the successor to the much-beloved Arkham franchise. For these reasons, it makes sense that the odds would be stacked against Gotham Knights, and the scrutiny would be high. Whether or not Gotham Knights lives up to expectations will come largely down on just what it is you're hoping to get from that experience." It's odd now that in 2024 I find myself thinking similar thoughts on DC's latest offerings, with only minor differences. This is the successor to the much-beloved Arkham franchise. These are the same characters, and this is a continuation of such a revered storyline. The decision then to take a traditionally single-player experience and replace it with a looter-shooter variant is questionable at best. In many ways, we see Rocksteady's best work on display. Their attention to detail, gameplay polish, animations, and voice acting all stand out as exceptional. Even the open-world Metropolis is ripe with character. The billboards, landmarks, and architecture all demonstrate an immense level of care that is nearly on par with Rocksteady's previous open world, Gotham City. Also in line with Rocksteady's traditional ambiance are the passive characters. Side characters will have conversations, mumble to themselves, and grumble over the need to support Task Force X, all while Batman's Brainiac-controlled voice spouts oppressive rhetoric over the city. Clearly, this is meant to capture the spirit of Joker's haunting voice over Arkham, Hugo Strange's menacing tones over Arkham City, and Scarecrow striking fear into Gotham City. In truth, it doesn't. It feels that it's a perversion of a character built to fantastic heights across a quadrilogy of prequels. An egregious take on Batman can be easily forgiven, though, by those not invested in the Arkhamverse's history. Arriving to Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League without the baggage of the Arkhamverse will allow for a fresh take on a brilliantly animated, incredibly voiced cast of characters in a good guys gone bad versus anti-heroes but not good affair. While that premise does allow for some exceptional opportunities in storytelling, Rocksteady's take comes crashing down partway through the campaign as the looter-shooter elements take hold. It's then that both the narrative and gameplay loop take a dramatic shift into the live service elements. As players are exited from a lengthy amount of tutorials, wisely designed to teach each of the mechanics of the characters and their core gameplay loop, they are released into a Metropolis for their standard fetch quests that can be found in almost any looter shooters. Go here, attack this, reap rewards. It's a loop that many games have done quite well while others have struggled with, particularly in this genre. In Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, it is again a mixed bag. Mission variety is sparse throughout Suicide Squad's roughly 10-hour mainline campaign. In my 20-plus hours with it, as optional side quests do yield narrative and gameplay rewards, I've lost count of just how many times I've been tasked with guarding a slow-moving vehicle or rescuing civilians from hiding places. That, in and of itself, may not ruffle too many feathers, but it did grow tiresome, particularly as some mission modifiers limit how your cast of characters can do damage to the enemies in the first place. In some instances, damage may only be done with grenades, which is fine, if there is a healthy supply available. In my experience, there was not, and that meant no amount of shooting, sliding, melee, ultimates, or team attacks could do any damage to the quickly multiplying enemy count. None seemed to spawn grenades with regularity, and it became an exercise in frustration. Other restrictors amounted to use only counter shots, only melee causes damage, or perhaps the most infuriating, critical hits only. Depending on your character selected, that might be a very easy or nigh impossible task, especially if you've not leveled up certain attributes of those characters in their oddly simple yet complex skill trees. It's an unforced error that, as an attempt to provide variety, has become extremely limiting in reality. Each of the playable characters' primary incentive, though, is their traversal, which works in combination with projectiles. A wholly unique traversal style per character allows for very different gameplay, whether you're experiencing King Shark, who is a more hulking and weighty character, Captain Boomerang, who makes use of the Speed Force that really amounts to a teleportation variant of travel. You've got Harley Quinn, who combines acrobatic ballet and the swinging talents that she carries with Batman's grapple technology. And then there's Deadshot, who makes use of a jetpack to both fly and hover. Rocksteady has clearly put a great deal of effort and an immense amount of resources into these mechanics, and it must be noted that they feel somehow far smoother than the previously NDA'd alpha that was released to some fans. They still are cumbersome though before being leveled up. Even then, each of the characters does feel wholly unintuitive despite being leveled up. There's certainly a learning curve that comes with each of them, and while there are XP bonuses at times to incentivize experimentation, it's likely that the majority of players will select a main character and stick with them, or quit entirely. That's a shame though, because quitting entirely will see many players miss out on a powered up anti-hero squad that really does synergize in the endgame. While taking on the Justice League in the campaign, none of the characters has had time to reach their max potential, and the game is still in conflict with itself. Is it a narrative-based shooter extending a time-honored story, or is it a live service gameplay loop ripe with loot and destruction? Endgame characters are fast, frenetic, and beautiful. It's not the feeling that screenshots or clips can even do justice either. It's about the feeling of playing through it, an understanding of your character's abilities, and a learned language of the HUD's information, which is extensive. Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League is at its best in its early missions, opening with strong narrative and immaculate cutscenes. The full prowess of Rocksteady's heritage is on display here. Perhaps the most impressive and enjoyable mission is one where our band of anti-heroes move through the creative retelling of the Arkham series, though Arkham Origins is unceremoniously ignored. The band of misfit heroes does a great job at providing appropriately confused and humorous quips throughout the mission, and it sets the tone for the hours to come. Eventually, though, their refusal to acknowledge the seriousness of the situation does seem to tire, as Brainiac's destruction is indeed world-ending. Still, King Shark and Harley Quinn each stand out as being both simultaneously grounded and amusing, with their voice acting a notable notch above the rest. In battling the iconic cast of DC heroes, we bear witness to Rocksteady's take on what a greater DC universe looks like. This R-rated take on our heroes paints them as incredibly menacing, as Brainiac's mind control has turned them undeniably evil. No redemption arcs here for the Justice League. As the title implies, it's our task to kill them. And we do. It's in the title. Whether that premise bothers you or not will come down to personal preference, but what cannot be denied is that each of these boss fights are wholly disappointing in nature. Be it Flash, Green Lantern, or Superman, these battles are the same. Open arena, dodge, shoot. Simple, boring. The frantic movements and difficult to track bosses betray their great legacy. At least in the case of Superman, we do get to see his powers in action. Green Lantern's constructs, though, are uninspired and lack creativity. Flash's battle is by far the least fun, as it's not clear at first exactly what you're supposed to do, and once understood, it's simply an exercise in persistence and patience. Once defeated, the Suicide Squad's handling of each hero will most assuredly rub some the wrong way. In an attempt at humor, after Flash's death, we see Captain Boomerang aim to urinate on Flash's corpse. Then, each of the Suicide Squad compliments him on the size of his equipment. It could be funny, but it's in such stark contrast to the tone set forth in the moments prior that it just feels like confusion on the part of the narrative team. That confusion makes itself apparent in their handling of Batman, Lex Luthor, and just how the team accomplishes their Elseworld adventures. We have these ideas, we need these features. Make them work. Suicide Squad is a dichotomy of single-player glory and polish next to live service clutter. Parts of it feel wonderfully attentive to detail, and others just obnoxious traversal. The contrasting nature of the campaign versus the endgame demonstrates a lack of clear intent and a harsh departure from established canon, as well as a willingness to take risks that in some ways would deserve applause had it worked. The problem therein is that with 9 years in between projects, Rocksteady's Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League falls drastically short of their legacy and will leave many wanting. If you arrive at Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League wanting more of the Arkhamverse and its gameplay, it's likely you'll be leaving disappointed. If you're free from that weight, you might find an impressively produced live service title waiting for you after an uneven campaign. It's the best of games like Destiny, Anthem, Marvel's Avengers, and Crackdown that are on display here. That may ward off some. It may also attract others if you enjoyed those titles, and it's likely that if you did enjoy those titles, you'll have a grand time in Suicide Squad's endgame. If you can get there. We can only hope now that we do not have to wait another 9 years to experience a single-player DC narrative on par with the Arkham quadrilogy.